Alright guys, so I've got to preface the Beryl video with a little bit of backstory on why it turned out so. The Beryl was the single rifle that shot between two of the worst environmentals that we've seen on the channel. First day, we took it out. I think it was 10 to 20 mile an hour, 10 on the sustained, 20 or so on the gusts, I think. But then it was also raining and it was cold. Because of that, we had to wrap the camera so it wouldn't break from the rain. And some of the saran wrap had blown loose from the wind, and I forgot to switch it off of autofocus. And as a consequence, most of the footage, until we were able to realize it, was out of focus. And so we only have some of the in-focus footage that day of the discussion. The second day we took this out, we had full value winds going from the 9 to 3, and this time we had 25 mile an hour sustained winds and up to 35 mile an hour gusts. Now that is hands down the most extreme we've seen as far as winds go. When we shot the AI at that same second attempt with the Beryl, I had to make about 3 mils plus of adjustments on the windage at about 800 or 900 yards. Now that is extreme for even for 308. So that being said, I want you to understand that we are shooting in extreme high wind conditions with a full wind value and using nothing more but a holographic sight and no magnification, which is very similar to the Polish loadout, to when I worked with the Poles in both Afghanistan in 2013 and all up and down Poland in 2014 and 15. So I hope you guys enjoy this. This is a step back in memory lane for me, and thanks for watching. Marsz Dąbrowski, ziemi wolskie to Polski, za twoim przewodem.
What the heck are you singing?
Oh, it's the Polish national anthem.
Why do you know how to sing the Polish national anthem?
You don't?
No. 150. Hit. Hit. Nice.
You know where on the place those were hitting? I don't know if you know, but this I could not tell with this optic.
I'm on it too. Hit upper quarter of the plate. Hit 250. Hit right half. Hit.
Yeah, I'm aiming way off plate at this point,
Already?
which is unusual for a 5.56 even.
Yep. Alright, 300. Off the right edge by about a quarter target. Good elevation. Hit. Off the right edge, just barely scraped it. Hit.
Yeah, now I'm about 2 target lengths to the left of it.
That's crazy.
This is really bad.
That's crazy.
This is worse than any wind condition we've...
So normally when you're shooting 5.56, 223, 5.56 out to 300, usually you don't really have to start correcting for wind, at least on the target sizes we're shooting, which are about chest-sized targets.
Yes, I mean typically it's still on the I'm correcting on the edge of the target rather than
Right.
off the target.
Right, and it's not till beyond 300 that you might have to start correcting off target.
Yes, so I am significantly off target already. Like this is a correction I would put at 500 normally, even on bad wind conditions.
Yeah. 350.
Ready?
Yeah. Didn't see any impacts here. Hit. Right half of the target. Hit. Right
Okay.
half of the target.
That's getting even past 2 target lengths now.
Wow.
And it's getting more and more difficult because the targets are getting smaller in correlation to my optic.
Yep. All right, I'm on at 400. All right, it was in the right at the base edge of the target, about a half target to the right. Hit. That was over the top right edge. Off the left edge that time, but good elevation. I think that was a hit. Again, like no movement on target, but I'm pretty sure it was an impact. 450.
Okay, so just as a reference, the EOTech ring is a 65 MOA ring.
Right.
So that gives me 32.5 MOA on the radius to really use as a scale.
Yep.
I am 2/5 from the center dot to the edge of the radius right now.
Okay.
And for
Two,
that
2/5.
2/5. So I'm probably what did we say it was? 32.5?
Yeah.
So it's probably close to like 20
So
MOA to
you're
the
holding
left.
20 MOA right now.
To the left.
Wow. Okay, that looked to be about a quarter target length short on the left edge. I think that was left to the left leg. Short left. But you're farther left off the left edge beyond the leg. No observation. The left legs of the target. Okay, in between the left leg and the target on the bottom edge.
So it's right underneath it.
Right underneath it, but to the left. Hit. That was up and right, about maybe a quarter target to the right, a quarter target high. That was high again on the right edge. Hit.
Okay. So you see the yellow placard behind it?
The F.
Yeah. I ended up having to use that as a reference point to basically gauge over and under, but my red dot was on the bottom left of that placard.
Okay.
So.
All right, so 500 here, and this is going to be horrible to try to call impact.
Nothing?
No. All right. Go ahead. High, good windage. It was high up above the bar. A full target.
Was that it?
The plate is not moving, but it certainly sounded like a hit.
Ready?
Yeah. Underneath the target to the right of it. Good elevation. Same spot as your last shot. Hit.
Okay. So that last shot, you see, if you look at the dirt clot.
Let me get behind this. Okay. We're looking at the whole berm.
So if you look at the dirt clot on the left side, it's a little darker.
Yep.
That splotch, I was aiming to the middle left of it, almost at the far left target.
Yeah, okay.
That's hanging.
Yeah.
But if you just go on top of the bar in the vicinity of that dirt clot, that was the final point of aim for an impact. So we're talking about probably like 3 or 4 chest lengths of travel.
Probably, yeah, minimum, right?
Do you think, is that more or 3 or 4 chest lengths? Probably more, actually.
That's
more,
like
more than
3
3 or
and a
4,
half,
yeah.
at least. You want to just take it off?
Yeah. Everything's still rolling?
This is off, but it's
Okay. Invariably, this entire recording has just been a nightmare of a recording itself. So, we're talking about the Polish Beryl rifle. To me, just looking at this brings back a lot of cool memories because I worked with these guys closely, both in Poland and in Afghanistan. And I didn't realize back then, but it was basically developed from the Polish Tantal that they had. It was an attempt for them to integrate into the 545 Soviet bloc, and then, well,
we know how that turned out.
well, yeah, it was no more. The communist utopian society. So
instead, they integrated into NATO.
Yeah. So they were stuck with a lot of AKMs, which they knew they needed to modernize, and they had they were joining this was pre them joining NATO, I think. So when you look at it, the Czechs were integrating into NATO with 5.56 with the Brand NATO 5, and their initial adaptation was just entirely design something new based on the G36. The Poles, on the other hand, they had the Tantal that they had adapted for 5.45. Excellent rifle to begin with, but they weren't going with 5.45 going into NATO anymore. So they came up with the Beryl. And this is there have been multiple iterations of the Beryl. The scope rail had a lot of changes. The front end had a lot of changes. The forearm had a lot of changes. But essentially, if you look at the AK-9er project, it's kind of interesting. I mean, the 5.56 AK, the NATO version AK, what we see, this is one of them that an entire state had adopted. Very mild on the recoil.
Super mild.
Really easy to shoot, right?
Yeah, very. I'd say it's more akin to the recoil impulse you feel in like the MP5 system, where it's more of just kind of like a rolling pop.
Yeah. So today I feel like the conditions we're shooting in it doesn't do it justice. Unfortunately, it's a loaner rifle, so we have to get it done and then pushed out. The one thing, the Poles did use a lot of EOTechs, but unlike the Czechs, they didn't use magnifiers behind it very often. So they used a lot of 5.52, so not the EXPS system, obviously. But this was the closest that we had to it on hand that we could zip on and have it run. This is the second time we've shot it out here. The first time was horrible weather, but the wind wasn't as bad.
Right.
Not that it was blowing faster, but it was blowing at an angle where we weren't getting a full value.
Right, the value of the wind was different, right?
Indeed, yes. So today I would argue, even though it's warm, it is significantly more challenging in this type of wind for this cartridge.
Yeah.
Shooting a limited red dot reticle. But thank goodness this was an EOTech though. Because if it were just an aim point and there was just a single aiming dot, I wouldn't be able to judge. I wouldn't be able to tell how far I was drifting off.
Right.
So
because you were using the outer ring of the EOTech is in terms of a reference point
Yep.
to gauge your offset off of the target. Yeah?
Yep, and that's the only way. I mean, you can't. Kentucky windage is a good term for guessing. Even though if you lack a reticle, you could still use different items out there as a reference point. Like I used the placard as a reference point earlier.
Right.
But then if you don't have those reference points, say you're in the desert.
Yeah.
Which this particular weapon system has worked in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to use reference points like that. I mean, that's the only way.
So in terms of the trade-off, you obviously, I'm sure we can speak to this a bit more, but the EOTech obviously has a minimum height that it forces the shooter's eye to come up off the top of the gun, designed, of course, to be behind flat-top AR-style firearms. This is an absolute co-witness XPS.
So
you could have had, if we weren't going for like the whole the Polish loadout style with the EOTech,
sure.
You could have had an aim point on one of the lower mounts to allow yourself to get a little bit of a better cheek weld. But what you're saying is that you would still have probably preferred the EOTech based on the aiming reticle?
Mm-hmm. I would prefer the EOTech over the aim point, absolutely.
Yeah.
That being said, this height with low rings would be absolutely perfect with an LPVO.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious why the Polish army decided to go with EOTechs instead of LPVOs, because if you're looking at it, you use a really low mount, and the LPVOs always suffer with AKs because of the mounting interface.
Right.
So they came up with a really good dogleg system. It is a little higher, but I think they had to do that for strength. They had multiple generations, and this is the last generation where they bumped it even higher. Mm-hmm. And as they bumped it higher, you can still use your iron sights through the
so if you have a catastrophic failure of your optic, you can still, without having to QD it or to do anything, you can still run your irons.
Yeah, and it's also not tied to the dust cover. It's actually tied to the receiver trunnion.
Yes.
So that gives you two very solid mounting points instead of your dust cover that is not as solid of a mounting point.
Yep.
Again, I think this would have been a really nice 5.56 system if the Poles decided to run it with an LPVO. Mm-hmm. Now, again, going back, I cannot stress the point enough that the fact that we used an EOTech with the EOTech reticle, or I would say even like the primary arms, like the Cyclops reticle, where it's just like a horseshoe ring around the center point.
Yep.
Having that type of reference point is absolutely massive. And the EOTech, it has the little crosshair nubs on the end.
Yes.
That also was massive.
The
because
12, 3, 6, and 9.
Yes,
right?
because even those little reference points help me level it on a platform that is less stable, because I have no cheek weld right here.
Right.
And even I found myself, as I was shooting, doing this, pushing it as low as possible, and having the EOTech just rest on the bottom of the window.
So you weren't actually even trying to center the
no, I was,
reticle up in the window.
because I knew the EOTech it's going to be the same 0 wherever it is on the screen. So I would say that the fault, if it really is a fault of a system, I wouldn't say it's a fault of the system. I would say it's a bad mix-up between a really tall optic
on an already high mount.
Indeed. And again, this is the Polish loadout. We're not doing this because this is an optimum choice for us.
Yeah.
But we're trying to duplicate a loadout that the Poles were using.
Well, it's really interesting. It's the same thing that you see on a lot of the FSB loadouts that we've been researching and looking at. A lot of those guys run the EOTech systems on top of a dust cover style mount from like the guys at Zenit or something like that. And they're all up on these high mounts. So it's a very, very much a very heads up type of shooting style.
I would say this though. I mean, they have the Zenico stocks that they have. Mm-hmm. It has an adjustable cheek comb
on them. That's true. Yeah.
So that helps out a lot. And then let's say if you really want to do a lot of ripping, like close range shooting, and you don't really care about your cheek comb, and you're just trying to get like a heads up display,
that's totally different.
Drop it down.
Yeah, totally different. I think that setup is actually very enjoyable to shoot on a close range setup where you have a very heads up style approach. But when, as you say, when you're leaning down over the top of the the gun, trying to shoot it out to 500, it can be
Yeah.
a detriment.
All in all, I wish this were mine, because it's kind of, there's a couple systems that take me back to my time in Europe. The Beryl, the 805, the Gewehr 36, and the FAMAS.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect to run one of these stateside, and it actually, it's kind of nice. It's like seeing an old friend. We learned how to march like the Poles, because we were marching in their formations for some ceremonies. The Poles, they do the Polish salute. Polish salute is 2 fingers up, kind of like the Boy Scouts are 3 fingers, right? I think so. The Polish 2 fingers, and we ate a lot of pierogi, drank a lot of vodka. Plenty stories that I think we'll share when we do the classic. We could probably cut like a section in the classic where we just talk about. We could just have a couple drinks and talk about my time in Poland. Do you enjoy arguing with other viewers on the internet on which rifle performed better on practical accuracy? Well, we have a solution for you. Go to our Patreon page and scroll down. You'll find the Practical Accuracy Scoreboard, where we have ranked and compiled all the data of all the firearms we have tested on the Practical Accuracy course. Furthermore, it's already separated into the different categories, so you can go back to your argument as quickly as possible. And whether you decide to support us via Patreon, subscription, or just a normal viewer, we thank you.
716, this is 096, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Recon 1, green to green. How copy, over?
096, this is 716, roger, over. 16, 091, 1 pack, green, over. This is 716, roger, over.
16, 15 2, 1 Victor, 2 packs, Recon 1, over.